"Do it. Someone might see," she warned. The cowboy acted and the town froze. The sun had just started to dip behind the distant hills, painting the small frontier town in shades of orange and gold. Dust floated gently in the air, catching the last rays of light. The streets, usually quiet this time of day, seemed emptier than usual. Shops were closing, children had gone home, and the wind whispered softly through the wooden buildings. Yet something about the town felt uneasy, as if it was holding its breath. A lone rider approached slowly from the horizon. He was tall and strong, with broad shoulders and steady hands that rested lightly on the reins of his horse. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but there was an air of confidence about him. Every so often, his eyes would scan the town with careful precision. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He simply moved forward, and with each step, the townsfolk began to notice him. From the porch of a small house near the edge of town, a woman watched. She was in her late 20s, sharp-eyed, and her movements were quick, almost restless. She had lived in this town all her life and knew its people, its rules, and its hidden fears. When she saw the cowboy, she felt something unusual stir in her chest. She didn't know him, but she could sense that he carried a weight of experience. He was not just a traveler. He was someone who had faced danger before. She stepped off the porch and walked toward the street, keeping her distance. The wind tugged at her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear nervously. She had to speak to him, to warn him, but at the same time, she feared what might happen if the wrong people saw them together. The town had eyes everywhere, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. One wrong move could ruin not just her day, but her life. The cowboy stopped near the center of the town. He looked around, taking in the small wooden buildings, the shuttered windows, the dirt streets. There was something familiar about the quiet, almost too quiet. He sensed tension in the air, a weight that pressed down on him. He could feel the eyes of the townsfolk on him, hiding behind doors, peeking from windows, silently judging. But he didn't flinch. He didn't try to hide. He simply waited, as if he knew that someone important would find their way to him. The woman hesitated for a moment, then decided she had no choice. She walked closer, her steps quiet but deliberate. When she reached him, she looked up into his face, her eyes wide and earnest. "Do it. Someone might see," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft rustling of the wind. The cowboy turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence without speaking. He didn't ask her to explain. He already understood that her warning carried more weight than the words themselves. There was urgency in her tone, a hidden fear that he could not ignore. He sensed that whatever he was about to do would change the town, perhaps even put him in danger. But hesitation was not an option. He had learned long ago that some moments demanded action, and inaction could cost lives. Around them, the town seemed to hold its breath. Windows remained tightly shut, and doors stayed locked. The usual chatter of people ended abruptly, as if an invisible hand had silenced them. Children peered from behind their parents' skirts, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. The baker paused mid-step with a basket of bread, unsure whether to move or stay. Even the animals seemed to sense the tension. Dogs stopped barking, and horses shifted uneasily in their stalls. The woman's eyes met the cowboy's again, and she nodded slightly as if to say, "Now or never." She turned her gaze toward the nearby saloon where a few men lingered, talking quietly among themselves. They were known in town for their quick tempers and even quicker hands. If they noticed what was about to happen, there could be trouble. She knew she had to act swiftly, to make sure the right choice was made without drawing unwanted attention. The cowboy's hand rested lightly on the saddle, ready for whatever came next. He didn't look around anymore. He focused entirely on the woman and the silent understanding between them. They didn't need words. The moment itself spoke loudly. Every person in the town, whether they realized it or not, was now part of a story they had not chosen to witness. The air was thick with anticipation, and even the smallest movement seemed significant. She took a deep breath and stepped a little closer, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for him. "If you wait too long, it will be too late. They are watching, and they will act if you hesitate." Her hands trembled slightly, not out of fear for herself, but for the town she had grown up in and the lives that hung in the balance. She had seen what hesitation could do before, had watched injustice go unchecked because people were too afraid to move. She would not let that happen again, not if she could help it. The cowboy nodded ever so slightly, acknowledging her words. In that moment, it was clear that he understood more than she could explain. He could feel the weight of the town's fear pressing down, but he was not afraid. He had faced worse in his life, and he knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. His eyes scanned the street one last time, noticing small details. A loose board on a porch, a shadow moving behind a window, the way the wind carried the scent of dust and wood smoke. Every detail mattered, for this moment would define what came next. She stepped back slightly, giving him room, yet staying close enough that he could feel her presence. The town seemed to pause around them, the very air holding its breath. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the faint creak of a wagon wheel in the distance and the soft clatter of a horse shifting its weight. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavier than the last. Finally, the cowboy made his choice. He moved deliberately, smoothly, and with a confidence that came from experience. He acted with the understanding that some decisions were irreversible, that some moments could not be undone. The woman watched, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. She had warned him, and now it was his turn to act. Even from a distance, townsfolk began to sense a change. Something was happening that had never happened before. The usual order, the invisible rules that had kept them quiet and submissive, were beginning to shift. Eyes widened, and whispers started in corners. For a moment, the entire town was caught between fear and curiosity, unable to look away, unable to move. The cowboy's presence and his action were breaking the pattern, challenging the norm, and drawing everyone into a single tense moment. The woman exhaled slowly, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because she had done what she could to prepare him, and anxiety because what came next was unknown. The town was a delicate balance, and one wrong move could tip it into chaos. Yet deep down, she knew that this act was necessary. Sometimes courage had to be shown in public, in full view of those who doubted, so that others could see and feel the possibility of change. As the sun finally dipped below the hills, casting long shadows across the street, the cowboy's figure seemed almost heroic against the orange sky. He did not boast, he did not call attention to himself, but there was a quiet strength in the way he stood. Every detail of his posture, every movement spoke of readiness, patience, and resolve. The woman watched him, her eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight, understanding that the story they were about to make would be remembered for years to come. And in that moment, the town, so long silent, so long afraid, was about to see something it had never imagined. The town was still quiet after the cowboy's first move. It was the kind of quiet that did not feel natural. It felt forced, like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. The wind moved through the empty streets, but even the wind seemed unsure of what to do. People stayed behind closed doors, peeking out through cracks in the shutters. They wanted to know what would happen next, but they were afraid to watch too closely. The cowboy stood in the center of the town, his face calm and serious. He did not look like a man who was trying to start trouble. He looked like a man who had already seen enough trouble and was tired of it. The woman who had warned him stayed close by, her eyes scanning the buildings and the people. She could feel the fear inside the town, the fear that had been there for years. She had lived in this town all her life, and she knew every secret. She knew who the powerful men were who controlled the town with money and threats. She knew which families had been hurt, which ones had been forced to stay quiet. She knew how the town had slowly become a place where people were afraid to speak. The cowboy could feel that fear too. He could feel the way the town had been trapped in silence. A few steps away, the saloon stood with its swinging doors. It was a place where men gathered to drink and talk, but tonight, it was different. The men inside had stopped their laughter. Their voices had lowered. They watched the cowboy with a mixture of anger and fear. Some of them had been part of the power that controlled the town. Some of them had been too afraid to resist. But now, all of them were watching. The woman turned to the cowboy and spoke softly. "You see that?" she said. "Those men are the ones who keep the town quiet. They make sure no one speaks up. They decide what is allowed. They decide what is not allowed." Her voice was low, but there was a steady strength behind it. The cowboy nodded. He did not need to ask for more. He could feel the truth in her words. He could feel the heavy weight of control that had been placed over this town for so long. He could feel how the people had been forced to accept it day after day. He could feel how it had slowly broken their spirits. The woman continued. "They don't like change. They don't like anyone who questions them. They are used to being the ones who decide. If they think you are a threat, they will try to stop you, and they will not care about anyone else." The cowboy listened carefully. He had seen people like this before. He knew that power could make men cruel. He knew that fear could make them even worse. He knew that when people believed they could do anything, they would try to do it. He also knew that sometimes the only way to break a cruel system was to stand against it, even if you stood alone. "Ask." The woman's eyes moved to the street. She could see a few people hiding behind barrels, watching from the corners. She could see a mother holding her child close, her face pale and worried. She could see an old man leaning against the wall, his hands trembling. Everyone in the town had a story. Everyone had been hurt in some way, and everyone was afraid. The cowboy took a slow step forward. The woman felt her heart beat faster. She knew what he was about to do. She knew he was going to confront the men in the saloon. She also knew that if the men reacted badly, it could turn into a fight. But she believed in him. She believed that he was not there to cause trouble. He was there to stop it. The cowboy walked toward the saloon. Each step he took was calm, but determined. The men inside watched him with eyes that did not blink. The doors swung open and he stepped inside. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and alcohol. The sound of music and laughter had disappeared. The room became quiet as the men looked at him. The cowboy's voice was steady. "I need to talk," he said. "And I need to talk to the man who thinks he is in charge." A few men shifted in their seats. One of them stood up slowly, his face tense. He was a large man with a thick beard and a harsh look. He was known in the town as the one who controlled the money, the one who decided who would get jobs and who would not. He had a voice that made people listen. "What do you want?" the man asked. his voice rough. The cowboy did not look angry. He looked calm. "I want you to stop controlling this town," he said. "I want you to stop making people afraid. I want you to let them live their lives without fear." The man laughed, a short, harsh sound. "You don't know what you're saying," he said. "This town has rules. I make the rules. You are just a stranger. You don't belong here." The cowboy looked around the room. He could see the fear in the men's eyes, but he also saw something else. He saw a small spark of doubt. It was there, hidden under the fear. He knew it was there because he had seen it before. People who were forced to obey often had hidden thoughts. They dreamed of a different life. They dreamed of freedom. The cowboy spoke again, but softer this time. "People are tired," he said. "They are tired of being controlled. They are tired of being afraid. You cannot keep them quiet forever." The man with the beard narrowed his eyes. "And what are you going to do about it?" he asked. The cowboy took a slow breath. "I'm going to show them that they don't have to be afraid," he said. The room fell silent. The men in the saloon stared at him. Some of them looked angry. Some looked unsure. Some looked afraid. The woman outside could feel the change happening. She could feel the tension growing. The town was watching. Then the man with the beard spoke again. "You think you can change this town? You think you can walk in here and tell me what to do?" His voice rose. He stepped closer to the cowboy, as if trying to scare him. The cowboy stayed calm. He looked the man in the eyes. "I don't think," he said. "I know." The men in the room shifted, unsure of what to do. The woman outside heard the sound of a chair moving. She held her breath. She could feel the fear building. She could feel the town on the edge of something new. The man with the beard raised his hand, as if to call for his men. But before he could do anything, the cowboy did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He placed it on the table. Everyone stared at it, confused. The cowboy spoke softly. "This is a list," he said. "A list of people who have been hurt here. A list of people who have been forced to stay silent. I didn't write it. I found it. And I'm going to make sure the town knows the truth." The men in the saloon stared at the notebook. Their faces changed. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Some looked like they wanted to deny it, but could not. The woman outside felt a wave of hope and fear at the same time. She knew the town would never be the same. The man with the beard grabbed the notebook quickly and looked at it. His face changed. He tried to hide his fear. He tried to act strong. But the truth was there, written on paper, and it could not be erased. The cowboy looked at him calmly. "You have been controlling this town for too long," he said. "It is time for people to know the truth." The man's face turned red. He slammed the notebook onto the table. "You don't know what you are doing," he said, his voice shaking. "You will regret this." The cowboy looked at him without fear. "Maybe," he said, "but I won't regret standing up for what is right." The men in the saloon looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The town outside was still quiet, but the air was changing. The woman could feel it. She could feel that the town was waking up, slowly, like a person rising from a long sleep. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that change had started. As the cowboy left the saloon, the townspeople watched from behind windows. They had seen something they had never seen before. They had seen a stranger stand up to the powerful men. They had seen someone refuse to be afraid. The woman walked beside the cowboy as he stepped back into the street. She looked at him with respect. "You did it," she said softly. "You showed them." The cowboy nodded. "The town will not be quiet anymore," he said. "Not if I can help it." The woman looked toward the saloon. She could still see the men inside, angry and confused. She knew they would not give up easily. But she also knew that fear had been broken. The town had seen a new kind of courage. The wind blew again, moving the dust in the street. It felt different now. It felt like a new beginning. And somewhere in the town, a small voice whispered, "Maybe we can change things." The cowboy walked out of the saloon with the woman close behind him. The air felt heavier now, as if the town itself was thinking. People still hid behind doors and windows, but their eyes were not just watching anymore. They were thinking. They were remembering. They were starting to feel something they had not felt in a long time: hope. The cowboy did not speak. He simply walked toward the center of the town, where the old flagpole stood. It was a place where people often gathered for announcements. It was a place where the town felt together. The woman walked beside him, her heart beating fast. She could feel the tension growing. She had warned him earlier that the men in the saloon were dangerous. She had warned him that the town was ruled by fear. But she did not know how the town would react now that someone had dared to speak. The cowboy stopped near the flagpole. He looked around at the empty street. He knew the town was not truly empty. He could feel people watching from inside their homes. He could feel them hiding behind barrels, peeking through cracks, listening for any sound. The cowboy understood that this moment was not just about him. It was about the people who had been afraid for years. He spoke softly but loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I did not come here to cause trouble," he said. "I came here because this town needs to stop living in fear." The woman watched him, surprised by his calm voice. She had expected him to be more angry, more forceful, but he spoke with quiet strength, like someone who had learned that anger alone could not change things. A sound came from the distance, a door creaking open. The cowboy looked toward it. A man stepped out slowly, his eyes fixed on the cowboy. He was older, with a tired face and rough hands. He looked like someone who had lived hard and had given up hope long ago. The woman recognized him. He was one of the townspeople who had suffered the most. The man stood in the street, not sure if he should come closer. His body shook slightly. The cowboy noticed and did not move quickly. He waited, giving the man time to decide. Finally, the man spoke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. His voice was weak, but there was something behind it, a question that had been trapped inside him for years. The cowboy looked at him and replied, "Because someone has to." The older man's eyes filled with tears. He looked down at his hands, then back at the cowboy. "I used to be strong," he said. "I used to be brave, but this town, it took that from me. It took it from all of us." The woman felt a tear fall down her cheek. She did not try to hide it. She had been angry for so long. She had been tired of living in fear. She had been afraid to hope. But hearing the older man speak made something inside her break free. The cowboy spoke gently. "You can have it back," he said. "You can be strong again, but you have to believe it." The older man shook his head. "Belief is not enough," he said. "They will punish us. They will make an example of anyone who speaks up." The cowboy nodded. He understood. He knew that the men in the saloon would not give up easily. They would try to scare people back into silence. They would use threats and lies. They would try to break the town again. The woman stepped forward. "They already tried to break us," she said. But something changed today. Someone stood up. Someone showed them that we are not weak. The older man looked at her. He seemed surprised that she was speaking. In this town, women were expected to stay quiet, but she had never been quiet. She had always spoken her mind, even when it was dangerous. The cowboy looked at the older man again. "You don't have to fight alone," he said. "You don't have to be brave by yourself. If you stand with others, you will be stronger." The older man's eyes shifted toward the buildings. He could feel the town's eyes on him. He could feel the fear again, trying to return. But he also felt something else, something new. He felt the possibility of change. He took a deep breath. "If we do this," he said, "we need a plan." The cowboy nodded. "You are right," he said. "We need a plan. We need to be careful. We need to make sure everyone is safe." The woman looked at the cowboy. She could see the seriousness in his eyes. She could see that he was not simply a stranger. He was a man who understood how to face danger. She trusted him. The cowboy began to speak, outlining a simple plan. "First," he said, "we need to let people know they are not alone. We need to bring them together. We need to show them that the town can stand together," he continued. "Second, we need to expose the truth. The people in the saloon have been controlling the town for years. We need to show the town what they have done." The woman nodded. She knew the truth was already out, but it was not known by everyone. Some people still believed the stories that the powerful men had spread. Some people still thought they had no choice. The cowboy's plan was to make the truth impossible to ignore. The cowboy added, "Third, we need to protect those who speak up. If the powerful men try to punish people, we must be ready to support them. We must be ready to stand together." The older man listened carefully. He could feel the truth in the cowboy's words. He could feel the possibility of hope, but he also felt the danger. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked. The cowboy looked at him. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know that doing nothing will not work. The town will stay the same. The fear will stay the same. People will keep suffering." The woman stepped closer. "We have already waited too long," she said. "We cannot wait any longer." The older man looked at the ground. He seemed to think for a moment. Then he looked up again, his eyes brighter. "Okay," he said. "I will help. I will speak." The woman smiled, but it was a small smile. She knew this was only the beginning. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. But she also knew that the town had started to wake up. As the older man spoke, other people began to step out of their homes. They were still afraid, but they were curious. They were drawn to the courage they saw in the cowboy and the woman. They wanted to believe the change was possible. A young boy stepped forward, his face filled with wonder. He had never seen anyone stand up to the powerful men. He looked at the cowboy with admiration. "Can I help?" he asked. The cowboy smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "You can help by telling your family. You can help by being brave." The boy nodded, feeling important for the first time. He ran back toward his house to tell his parents what he had seen. The woman looked at the growing crowd. She could feel the energy changing. The town was no longer silent. It was beginning to speak. It was beginning to move. But the cowboy knew the danger was still there. He knew the powerful men would not accept this easily. He knew they would fight back. He knew they would try to scare people again. He turned to the woman and said, "We must act carefully. We must not give them a reason to hurt innocent people." The woman nodded. "We will be careful," she said, "but we will not be silent." The cowboy looked at the crowd. He could see the fear in their eyes. but he could also see something else. Hope. It was a small hope, but it was real. He raised his voice and spoke to the crowd. "This town belongs to all of you," he said. "Not to the few who think they can control everything. If we stand together, we can make a new future." The crowd stayed quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, a few people began to clap. It started as a small sound, but it grew. More people joined in. The clapping echoed through the street like a wave of sound. It was not loud, but it was powerful. The woman felt her heart fill with emotion. She had never heard the town make a sound like that. It was a sound of unity. It was a sound of courage. The cowboy lowered his head slightly, acknowledging the crowd. He knew this was a moment the town would remember. He knew the powerful men would hear the clapping. He knew they would not like it. But he also knew that once people heard the sound of courage, they could not easily go back to fear. The town was changing. The fear was not gone, but it was being challenged. And the cowboy's action had started something that could not be stopped. The woman looked at him and whispered, "You did it. You gave them a reason to stand." The cowboy nodded, but his eyes were serious. He knew the real test was still ahead. The powerful men would respond. The town would face danger, but for the first time in years, the town had begun to believe in itself, and that belief was stronger than fear. The sound of clapping still echoed through the town, like a wave that had moved across the streets. It was a small sound, but it changed everything. The townspeople had never done something like that before. They had never shown their feelings in public. They had always stayed quiet, afraid of what the powerful men might do. Now, the quiet was broken. The cowboy stood in the middle of the street, his hat low, his face calm. He looked around at the people who had come out of their homes. Some were still hiding behind corners. Some stood bravely in the open. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting for what would happen next. The woman stood beside him, her hands clenched. She could feel the fear returning, like a cold wind. She knew the men in the saloon would not let this go. She could feel the tension in the air, like the moment before a storm. From the windows, the men in the saloon watched the crowd. Their faces were dark with anger. They had been used to control, and control was slipping away. They did not like it. They did not know how to respond to something they had not expected. The leader, the man with the beard, stepped out of the saloon and onto the street. His face was hard, and his eyes were full of anger. He looked at the crowd and spoke loudly. "What do you think you are doing?" he shouted. "You are making a mistake. You do not understand what you are dealing with." The cowboy did not move. He simply looked at the man. "We understand enough," he said calmly. "We understand that this town has been controlled for too long." The man with the beard took a step forward. "You think you can change things?" he asked. "You think you can make us stop?" the cowboy answered. "I think people deserve to live without fear." The man laughed, a harsh sound. "You are a fool," he said. "You are a stranger. You do not belong here. If you keep this up, you will regret it." The townspeople watched in silence. They felt the anger in the man's voice. They felt the danger. Some of them stepped back, afraid. Others stepped forward, their faces showing determination. The woman could see the struggle in their eyes. The fear was still there, but so was something new: courage. The man with the beard raised his voice again. "You think you can stand against us?" he shouted. "Do you know what happens to people who stand against us?" The woman felt her heart pound harder. She knew what he meant. She knew the stories. She knew the punishment. She knew how people had disappeared or been forced to leave. She knew the way fear had been used as a weapon. The cowboy looked at him calmly. "I know," he said. "But I also know that fear cannot last forever." The man's face turned red with anger. He stepped closer, and his voice became louder. "Then you will learn," he said. "You will learn what happens to people who do not obey." The crowd began to shift. Some people began to whisper. Some began to step back. The tension grew. The woman felt a cold feeling in her stomach. She knew the situation could turn violent at any moment. But the cowboy did not move. He stood still, as if he was waiting for something. His eyes did not show fear. His eyes showed calm determination. The man with the beard reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. It was a chain of keys. He held it up in the air, showing it to everyone. "These keys," he said, "belong to the town. I have the power to lock and unlock everything. I control the store, the jail, the supplies. I control your lives." The crowd stared in silence. Some faces looked shocked. Others looked angry. The woman could feel the anger rising. She could feel the townspeople realizing how much control this man really had. The cowboy looked at the keys and then at the man. He spoke softly. "You have controlled people with fear and power, but power is not real if people refuse to obey." The man's face twisted with rage. He threw the keys to the ground. "Then take them," he said. "Take everything. See if you can keep this town alive without me." The cowboy did not move to pick up the keys. He simply watched the man. He knew that the man was trying to provoke them. He knew that the man wanted to make them act out of fear. The woman stepped forward. She looked at the man with the beard and spoke clearly. "You can't scare us anymore," she said. "We have been afraid for too long. We are done." The man laughed again. "You are not done," he said. "You will see. You will regret this." The cowboy spoke again. "Bite, we will not let fear control us," he said. "We will work together. We will rebuild this town, and we will make sure no one is controlled again." The man with the beard looked around at the crowd. He could see that his power was slipping. He could see that people were not afraid of him like they used to be. He looked angry, but he also looked uncertain. The townspeople began to move slowly. Some began to step forward, and others followed. They were not rushing. They were not acting wildly. They were moving together, carefully, like a group that had finally found a purpose. The woman could feel the change. She could feel the town beginning to unite. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, but powerful. The people were starting to stand up, not with violence, but with unity. The man with the beard saw this and became even angrier. He raised his voice and called out to his men. "Get them!" he shouted. "Show them what happens when they disobey." The men in the saloon began to move. They stepped forward with angry faces, ready to push the townspeople back into fear. The crowd felt the danger and began to panic. The woman felt her heart race. She knew the situation could become dangerous quickly. But the cowboy did not panic. He stepped forward and raised his hands. He spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "Stop!" he shouted. "Listen to me." The crowd paused. The men with the beard stopped for a moment, surprised that the cowboy had the courage to speak like that. The cowboy continued. "We are not here to fight. We are here to change this town. We are here to make it a place where people can live without fear." The man with the beard sneered. "You think you can change this?" he said. "You think you can make people follow you?" The cowboy looked at him. "No," he said. "I think people can make their own choices. The man's men looked confused. They had been told for years that they had to follow the leader. They had been told that the town was theirs, but now they could see the crowd. They could see the people who were no longer afraid. The cowboy spoke again. If you want to keep your power, you must stop hurting people. You must stop using fear. You must let people live freely. The man with the beard laughed again. You are dreaming, he said. This town will always be mine. The cowboy replied, Not anymore. The woman stepped forward and raised her voice. This town belongs to everyone, she said, not just to you. The crowd began to cheer quietly. It was not a loud cheer, but it was real. It was a sign that the town was waking up. The man with the beard looked around and saw that he was losing control. He realized that his power was slipping. He was angry, and he did not know what to do. For the first time, the man looked afraid. The woman saw it. She saw the fear in his eyes. She knew that the town had finally started to fight back, not with weapons, but with unity and courage. The cowboy stood tall and spoke once more. You can leave, he said. You can go somewhere else and keep your power there. But you cannot keep it here. The man with the beard took a step back. He looked around, then turned and walked back into the saloon. His men followed him. The town watched silently, not sure what would happen next. The woman let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She looked at the cowboy and whispered, We did it. The cowboy nodded, but he did not smile. He knew this was only the beginning. The powerful men would not disappear easily. They would try again. They would look for a way to take back control. But the town had changed. The fear was no longer the strongest thing in their hearts. Courage was. The townspeople began to talk to each other, slowly, carefully. They shared stories, and they began to realize they were not alone. The woman could see the first signs of change in the town's future. People began to plan. They began to think about a life without fear. The cowboy stood in the street, watching the town. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that the town had taken the first step. The town had found its voice. And that voice would not be silenced again. The town was different now. The air felt lighter, like a heavy weight had been lifted. People were still cautious, but they no longer moved like prisoners. They spoke softly to each other, and their faces showed a new kind of hope. It was not a loud or sudden change. It was a slow, steady change that could be felt in small moments. The cowboy stood near the center of town watching the people. He had not planned to stay long. He had come to help the town find its voice, and now he knew that his work was almost done. He had done what he could. Now it was up to the townspeople to keep going. The woman stood beside him, her eyes bright with emotion. She looked around at the people she had known all her life. She saw them walking with their heads held higher. She saw them talking openly. She saw them smiling again. She could feel the town slowly becoming alive. She turned to the cowboy and asked, What will you do now? The cowboy looked at her, and for a moment, he seemed unsure. Then he spoke quietly. I will leave, he said. I have done what I came to do. The woman nodded. She understood. She had known from the beginning that he would not stay. He was a traveler, a man who moved from place to place, helping people who needed courage. She felt a deep gratitude for him, but she also felt sadness. He had become a part of the town's story, even if only for a short time. The cowboy continued, But I will not forget this place, and I will not forget the people who found their courage. The woman smiled. You have changed us, she said. You have given us hope. The cowboy looked toward the saloon. It stood quiet now. The swinging doors closed. The man with the beard was gone. The town had not seen him since the confrontation. It was not clear whether he had left town or simply stayed hidden. But the important thing was that he no longer controlled the people. The fear was gone. The woman looked at the cowboy and asked, "What will happen if he comes back?" The cowboy's face turned serious. "Then we will stand together," he said. "We will not go back to fear. We will protect each other." The woman nodded. She knew he was right. She knew that change was not a single moment. Change was a choice that had to be made every day. The town would have to stay strong. They would have to stay united. A few people approached them, their faces still showing a mix of fear and hope. The older man who had spoken earlier walked up slowly. His steps were careful, but his eyes were brighter than before. He looked at the cowboy and spoke, his voice steady. "Thank you," he said. "I never thought I would feel brave again." The cowboy nodded. "You were always brave," he said. "You just forgot." The older man smiled, and for the first time in years he looked like a man who believed in the future. A young woman stepped forward next. She had been quiet throughout the events, but now she spoke with a clear voice. "We need to choose new leaders," she said. "We need people who will listen to us, not control us." The cowboy looked at her with respect. "You are right," he said. "You must choose leaders who serve the town, not control it." The woman listened carefully. She knew that the town needed a new start. She knew that the people needed to learn how to govern themselves. It would not be easy, but it was possible. The cowboy continued. "Start with small things. Decide how to share the supplies. Decide how to help each other. Decide how to protect the town together." The people nodded. They began to talk among themselves. The town was alive with conversation. The woman could hear the sound of people planning for the first time in years. It was a strange but beautiful sound. As the day turned into evening, the town gathered near the flagpole. They stood together not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. They were not sure what would happen next, but they knew they would face it together. The cowboy stood to the side, watching the scene. He could feel a sense of peace. He knew the town had taken its first real step toward freedom. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that the people now had something they had lost for a long time: their voice. The woman walked to the center of the crowd and spoke. Her voice was strong and it carried across the street. "We have been afraid for too long," she said. "We have been quiet for too long. But today, we found our courage. We found our voice, and we will not let it go." The crowd listened. They nodded, and some people began to clap. The sound was warm and real. It was not the same as before. It was not the sound of fear. It was the sound of unity. The woman continued, "We will take care of each other. We will share what we have. We will make sure no one is left behind. And if anyone tries to control us again, we will stand together." The cowboy watched her with pride. He knew she had become a leader. He knew the town had found a new future. The woman looked at the cowboy again and smiled. "Will you stay for a while?" she asked. The cowboy shook his head. "I cannot," he said, "but I will always remember this place." The woman nodded. She understood. She felt grateful for his help, and she felt ready to face the future. The cowboy mounted his horse, and the townspeople gathered to watch. They did not speak loudly. They did not shout. They simply watched with respect. They knew he had come to help, and now he was leaving. It was a quiet moment, but it felt important. The cowboy turned his head slightly and nodded to the woman. She nodded back. It was a silent promise that the town would continue to be strong. Then the cowboy rode away, leaving the town behind. The woman watched him disappear into the distance. She felt a mix of sadness and hope. She knew he was gone, but she also knew the town had changed forever. The people began to return to their homes, but they did not return the same. They returned with new courage. They returned with a new belief that they could shape their own future. That night, the town was quiet again, but it was a peaceful quiet. The fear was gone. The people slept better. They did not wake up in the middle of the night thinking about what might happen. They slept with the feeling that they were safe, not because someone controlled them, but because they stood together. In the days that followed, the town slowly changed. People worked together. They shared supplies. They helped each other rebuild. They chose leaders who cared for the town. They did not forget what had happened. They remembered the cowboy who came and gave them hope. And though the cowboy was gone, his actions stayed in the town's memory. The town learned that one brave act could change many lives. The town learned that fear could be broken. The town learned that courage was stronger than control. The woman often stood at the edge of town and looked toward the road where the cowboy had gone. She would sometimes imagine him riding through other towns, helping people find their voice. She would sometimes wonder if he was thinking of them too. But she knew one thing for sure: the town was no longer the same. It was a place where people could speak freely. It was a place where hope had returned. And that was a future worth living for.